Okay, good morning, everyone. It's 9 o'clock. I think we want to start by taking roll.
Dr. Solocito?
Present.
Ms. Buller? Dr. Grant?
Here.
Ms. Laredo?
Here.
Dr. Nolan?
Here.
Ms. Prado? I don't see her in the attendee list. Moderator, can you confirm that she's not in the attendee list?
This is the moderator. I do not see Diane Prado in the attendee list.
Okay, I'm going to mark her as absent for now. Ms. Berber?
Here.
Dr. Bradbury?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Fantastic. Well, first of all, I wanted just to apologize for the very kind of the back and forth on the agenda items here. We're going to do a little bit of that again today. So I just thought I would give you sort of an overview of how I foresee the day going so that you guys can kind of plan accordingly. We have Dr. Mark Nunez here with us online, and he was scheduled to present and be here for morning for agenda item 15. And so because he has planned his day around that, we will be starting with that, with agenda item 15. I think after that, we may approve the meeting minutes to finish that up, and then, which I believe is agenda item 3. And then, yes, and then we will go back to agenda item 8 and move on to A2. Yeah, A2. So with that, let's start with agenda item 15, update, discussion, and possible action on National Association involvement. Ms. Kathy Bowler.
Are we just doing Mark's report right now?
Sure. Yeah, let's do 15A.
We can do mine after.
Okay. I don't we have to do 15C as well?
Yeah, we'll do 15A.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Or I just thought we would finish 15, but
Okay.
Whatever
yeah.
you want.
Can we just do 15 and be done with it? Okay, thanks. So let's just start with 15A, please.
15A is the AAVSB overview. So,
Yep.
and I think Dr. Nunez is doing that from the board. Okay.
Hi, Dr. Nunez. We missed you.
We missed you. Yay.
Can you hear me okay, or no? Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Louder.
You are muffled.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me better?
It's still fairly muffled. I mean, we can make it out. Is there a different microphone you might be able to use?
Yeah, why doesn't Kathy start, then I'll see if I can get a different microphone.
I think he said, why
Moderator.
doesn't Kathy start?
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm happy to. Okay, thank you. I'll start with the ICVA thing, and I can talk also about the AAVSB think tank if Mark doesn't cover that too, but ICVA report is very short. We have our upcoming board meeting in June, and we are in the middle of, well, not the middle, towards the end of the spring testing window for the NAVLE. I will say that, this is happening all across the board, but Prometric is the entity that we contract with, as do the medical licensing and other examining boards, to do the testing, and they had a worldwide outage last weekend, apparently. 90-some centers were offline, so a lot of our test takers were unable to do it. So typically our spring window would be finished on Friday, or Friday or Saturday this week, but we are extending it to May 6th to accommodate all those poor candidates that got screwed over last week. So nobody's fault, just happened. We've worked with all the people to reschedule. We have, in this spring testing window, I think I said it before, over 2,000 candidates testing. Typically, we have about 1,500 or 1,400, so it's like 600 more. Every window, we're getting more and more test takers for lots of reasons. The scores will be slightly delayed, of course, because the window has been extended, but that's really it for ICVA. We are working with the deans of many of the colleges, of all the veterinary colleges, on this progress test that we are we've got a blueprint going, and we're working to create a progress test for use in the schools each year to evaluate students and to help them if they need some help in certain areas along the way, so that at the end of the day, their senior year, if there are problems, they've been addressed earlier. So that's going to, I hope, be a great asset to the universities as well, or the colleges, as well as the students. And that's it for ICVA. My presidency on the board runs out for ICVA this June, and our incoming president is a renowned equine vet, so I will continue to be on the board through September of 2024, the ICVA board, and that's it. Any questions?
Thank you. Thanks for representing us so well. It's really impressive what you've done. Why was there an outage? Did they figure that out?
No, I think it was some computer thing. You know, these prometric centers, these are high-stakes exams, as we know. They're proctored. They're in unique settings, and it's on online. It's not online, but you're working on a computer because you need to see visuals and things like that. And there was some outage, and it was like 90 centers across the world. So I will say the other thing that's happening, and it's another issue with everything. You have to have a proctored exam, of course, and like with many places, their Prometrics, and they're a big worldwide entity, are having issues with people that are supposed to be on running it, showing up, just not canceling right at the last minute. And you've got students or candidates that are waiting to take the test that can't take it because there's no proctor. So it's an ongoing issue that our board and our legal folks are working with, as well as many other boards that use them. So,
wow.
I know, so it's just another stressor for these poor candidates.
Yeah.
But we rescheduled everybody, and they'll be taking it this time.
All right, thanks. I think I'm going to hold public comment until the end of this report. So how are we doing up there, Dr. Nunez?
And Ms. Prado joined us as well.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Okay, is Dr. Nunez with us?
Moderator, would you be able to share the screen for audio issues and no microphone to help him perhaps connect via his phone?
Thank you, co-moderator. Just presented that, but I am looking for Nunez on my attendee list. Dr. Nunez, I've just promoted you to a panelist. We'll do a quick mic check.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
And can you see me now?
We can't see you.
Oh, hold on. One more button to press. How about now?
We can see your name. No. There you are. Yes. Hello. You look great.
You can hear me and see me. Good.
We can do both.
Okay. Phew. It's always so difficult. Okay. So nice to see you all and hear you all. And I miss you guys too. So I sent a copy of my report to Jessica if you wanted to distribute that. You can all still hear me, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, I'll keep going. So in September of 2022, I was elected to the board of directors to the AAVSP on my fourth attempt. It was the only meeting that I did not attend live, so maybe that was the trick. The board has 10 members on it, representing the states of 2 from Ohio, Maryland, North Carolina, Kentucky, Virginia, the District of Columbia, Alabama, and Nova Scotia. And then, of course, there's me from California. So um, I am the representative from the entire western half of the country. So that's been a lot of fun. There's some new members on the board, so I'm not sure if all of you know exactly what the AAVSB does. That's the American Association of Veterinary States Boards. Its mission is to support and advance the regulatory process for veterinary medicine. And we use lots and lots of programs and services from them. For example, they provide the RACE program, which develops and applies uniform standards for veterinary medicine continuing education. They also provide a great service called Racetrack, which is a free service that allows veterinary professionals to record all their CE coursework, which can be accessed by the participating regulatory bodies. It's a really neat system. I recently went to Western Veterinary Conference, and my little badge recorded all my CE, and it just gets transmitted to Racetrack and transmitted to the board. And when I'm up for renewal in August, I'm hoping that there won't be any flaws. I don't think there will be. AAVSB owns and operates the VTNE, the examination that our RVTs use to get licensed. AAVSB also does the Vault program, which is a service that allows the transfer of licenses, educational transcripts, ECFVG certificates, and so forth. In the old days, that was done by faxes and mails and things like that. They're currently doing what's called the VIVA program, which is the Veterinary Information Verifying Agency. That is going to allow all these data to be online and on demand for participating regulatory bodies. That also includes up-to-date disciplinary action. So when we are processing an applicant for license, we would, when all the states and provinces come on board, we'll be able to get up-to-date licensing information, including up-to-date disciplinary actions in all the different provinces. It's an incredibly complex task, computer-wise, and California should be proud of ourselves that we were the first state to go live and go online with an API data transfer. So yay, California, we're the best. They do the PAVE program, which is the program for the assessment of veterinary educational equivalence for people who have done their veterinary coursework in non-accredited, non-AVMA accredited or foreign veterinary programs. Recently, they started a PAVE for technicians that does a similar thing to evaluate educational requirements for non-accredited and foreign programs. They have the Watchdog legislative tracking newsletter that comes out monthly. There you can see a list of all the different pieces of legislation and regulation going through different states. They provide training for new board members called Board Basics and Beyond to help new board members be effective members in a regulatory body. And the Practice Act Model, or PAM, is another service they provide. This is almost, it's a model practice act that serves as a cut and paste tool that regulatory bodies can use when they're adding or revising their individual practice acts. California has its own resources and legal review processes when we're doing legislation and regulation. So we don't often use this resource, but a lot of other states will. One of the challenges that the AAVSB has is that not all states and provinces are the same. And they all have their own practice act, and a lot of times they don't want to be the same. They're proud of their states, and they may or may not agree with the position that California takes. So, especially with the Practice Act, since we're not using it, does not mean that we can't ignore it, because um, there's many opportunities that a Practice Act like that can be used as the gold standard, because it's been developed at the national level. So that's why it's important for us to be involved. And we've been trying to get a member on the board for quite some time. And now that we have one, we're going to stay at the table so that we won't be on the menu, as Dr. Sullivan would say. Other hot topics that may be rising up to the level of a position statements, or the Practice Act, or the what you all been talking about as well, the mid-level practitioner as a new license category, regulation of spectrum of care. Everything changed after the pandemic, and a lot of discussion is had on access to care and how is that going to be regulated. And that's topics that we're discussing at the committee level. Expanding the scope of practice has been a counter argument or counterpoint for the mid-level practitioner issue. Veterinary compound will be with us forever. It will always be there. And of course, telemedicine. And when we talk about the challenges that AAVSB has, we've been kind of spoiled in California. You don't realize that California is big, a big state with lots of licenses and license holders. And we have a staff up in Sacramento that is awesome. But some states have a staff of one, and some states even share their executive director with other states. So they're going to be utilizing the services of AVSP more. But I believe that as a board member, I have a responsibility to keep the association purpose in mind. They need to serve their members, their existing members, and that includes us. They can't just provide a uniform offering of what regulations should be. They have to be in tune to the unique desires and needs of the individual states. So how is that accomplished? Mostly, I'm here to listen to what you all need from the AVSB. How can we serve this board? How can we be a partner? How can we be involved? And another way of doing that is to ask that we get involved with them. Again, I always go back to our favorite quote from Dr. Sullivan: we have to be at the table. And how do we do that? At the committee level, I've listed a lot of the committees that the AAVSB has. In my outline there, the nominating committee, representatives to the ICVA, Kathy Bowler has been very involved with them. Bylaws committee, conference committee, regulatory policy task force. That's the hot button committee. That's like the weaponization of government committee. No, not really. So, and we just had a board meeting this week, and we were talking about how it's difficult to fill these positions. So we need volunteers. And also, how can California really be helping out and being leaders of this association by being on the board? And I thank the CVMA for endorsing me, for always having faith in my nomination process. It took 4 times to do it, but we finally did it. But my term was a short term. It was meant to fill another board member that didn't complete her term. So it's only a 1-year term. So that means that this September in Kansas City, the board position the director position is up for election. So I am humbly asking your endorsement for a nomination to that position at this meeting, and am open to hear any questions from the board or any wants or needs from the AAVSB.
Thank you, Dr. Nunez. Anybody have any questions? Ms. Bowler.
Thank you, Dr. Nunez. And I assume at a certain point in the program, we will get to where we can take a vote on nominating Dr. Nunez for reelection.
We can do that as soon as he's done with his presentation.
Cool.
He gets done, we can take a motion. It's under 15C, the call for nominations.
All right, perfect. I had a couple of questions, and thank you so much, Mark, for serving. I know you have a huge, busy practice, and this is a lot of extra work, and we have seen and gotten much more involved with AAVSB in the last, well, since I've been on this board. At the beginning, we weren't really involved at all 9 years ago, and now Jessica's on committees, I'm on some committees, you're a board member, so we are gradually getting more and more involved. And we realize, and they should have our involvement, since California is by far the largest, bigger than Canada, bigger than anything else, in terms of number of practitioners, number of consumers, et cetera, et cetera. And you're right, we're lucky. We have an awesome staff. We have a budget. We don't need the board training. DCA does terrific board training for us. And we have the luxury of having a lot of support that many of these other boards in other states don't have. So AAVSB does provide some terrific services. I have a question on the committees. Who appoints those committees? Is it the board of directors? People apply, and then the board picks the committees, or do you know what the process is?
There is through the website or at the annual meeting, an opportunity to submit, put your name in as a person of interest that wants to serve on these committees, and then from that list, it's usually the executive committee of the board that appoints members to the individual committees. And I've only been there for 1 year, but I'll do my best to get on the executive board. But it might take another year or two.
And are the committees open to non-veterinarians, non-professional, other board members, public members and whatnot, or just licensed professionals?
No, they're not. They're not restricted to licensed professionals. Public members who have served on regulatory bodies, I'm pretty sure are eligible. I'll confirm that, but it wouldn't be just licensed professionals, because boards are comprised of more than that.
Okay, and I have one last question. I know AAVSB, and I'm thankful for they have certainly a lot of resources, and they have and they're increasing their staff as well. Have you heard anything in terms of one of the things we talked about last year, and we were unsuccessful, but I think, and not just for our board, but for the Canadian boards and everyone else, have they reconsidered, or for this upcoming meeting in September, which hopefully we'll all be going to, are they considering a hybrid option for board members from provinces and states that cannot attend? No?
I haven't heard any discussion about that, but I can certainly make it be heard. I can bring that up at our next board meetings, that California is definitely still interested in that. Although I know that there may have been some changes in the travel ban that California has, but I think that economics-wise, it would be a good option to zoom in and so forth.
I would think other boards, like especially the Canadian, but other boards that don't have the budgets that we have. Obviously, AAVSB underwrites travel, et cetera, but it's time away from the job and things like that, that the hybrid option might be helpful for other boards to get more boards involved with the AAVSB. So that's just my question.
Now, don't bash the Canadian boards. They're very nice people up there.
Oh, I love the Canadians. I love them.
Thank you, Dr. Nunez. Good to see you.
I did just want to clarify one point. One of the committees, the PAVE for RVT committee, I resigned from that because I was so overwhelmed with my workload, but without disclosing the roster, there was some California representation on that as well. So we'd also had good, very capable representation from California on that committee as well.
So how many committees are you currently serving on right now?
Since this is my last board and committee meeting, I'm down to single digits. It's very exciting.
Wow.
Not for us, but we're happy for you. You put in so much work, Jennifer, honestly. Thank you. Dr. Nunez, is there any talk about the presenters and the lectures? I know that we've had some concerns about them being, industry-led, so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. Are you done with the
Go
question?
ahead.
I do know that has been a concern, that the presentations at the annual convention have been a little one-sided on some of the hot topic issues that we've been talking about. And again, it's been a learning curve to understand how the, whenever you start with a new association, there's a certain culture there that you just got to learn about and learn how to most effectively serve as a good board member. But I assume that that's something that's talked at the conference committee, and then further discussion will be had at the board level. But it's my belief, certainly, that when in any of these issues, we need to hear from all sides of any argument to make the best decision. And always keep it in mind that we serve the consumers, and the consumers are relying on us to hear all sides and make wise decisions on policy and regulation.
Yeah, Jessica?
Yeah, I was recently appointed to the conference committee to make sure that any of the concerns are heard. And there's a number of the individuals on the conference committee who have shared the same concerns, and so we're working to make sure that improves over time.
Great.
And also the validity of the content that's provided. As you recall, there was some content that we were concerned about that was presented that wasn't accurate. And so we're requesting that speakers provide that information up front so we can do our best to vet what's provided, because we don't want to have a speaker make these broad statements about something that's not correct.
And I think California fact-checked them when that happened at the meeting. In fact,
I remember that, yes. That was
I think, Jessica, are you also on the Executive Director Advisory Committee?
Yes, I was actually going to ask you if you have heard anything about that. Just as a reminder, board members, the board was successful in asking the AVSB add the Executive Director Advisory Committee to the bylaws to make it an official committee, because it was an ad hoc committee that was formed, and I attended, I think, one meeting when I first started, and then the committee never met after that. And so we had asked, and all of the board agreed and added it to the bylaws. It's my knowledge that it has yet to be constituted. I know it was approved in September, but I don't think members have been appointed. So I don't know if you've had any updates on that, or if you heard when they.
Yeah, it's going to be I think it's going to be finalized at the annual meeting, but it's on the list of resolutions and bylaws changes that's going to be voted on at the annual meeting. So it definitely has been elevated to the committee level. It's no longer a task force. It just needs to be voted on at the annual meeting, as I understand it.
It was. In September, it was voted on and approved by the whole body. And so it's just up to now, I think either the AVSB board president or the board of directors to appoint and get that committee going. But it is part of the bylaws.
Yeah, it's been, again, a little bit of a challenge understanding exactly who's on the different committees. It's not really on the website, including the the websites that board members have access to. So it's a work in progress. Because that's also, when you look at the states that represent the board of directors, it's a little bit eastern and southern rather than western, and that doesn't represent the entire membership. And I would think that the same applies to the composition of committee members. That we need to get the entire nation, including California, involved. So I'm working on trying to get a better understanding of the composition of all these committees. But again, it's been less than a year and I'm working on it, but I hear you.
Thank
Great.
you.
So if you get an update on who's on the committee, that's what you're asking, right? If you've been reappointed or
Yeah,
appointed to the new committee?
Well, what I've been told is I'm the sole remaining member from back when I started in 2018, but there hasn't been any, since it's been added to the bylaws, there hasn't been any appointments since then. They've solicited interest a few times, and there is interest, but to my knowledge, no appointments have been made.
So no committee has been formed yet?
Correct.
Okay. So keep your eye on that, Dr. Nunez. Is there anything, how should we communicate with you about our, what we find important?
What?
How are we, like you were saying earlier in your presentation that you want to represent, California and what we're concerned about. I'm guessing you're in communication with Jessica? Okay.
Yeah.
That I answered my own question with that statement.
Yeah. I would assume that the board would be represented through Jessica or through the board president. But you all have feel free to share my email address, my cell phone number with any of the board members, and I'd be happy to take the call. And I'm enjoying it. I'm having a lot of fun. Thank you for this opportunity. And who knew that the California-Kentucky alliance would be so strong? Kentucky is a great state to work with. Who knew?
Great. That's great. Fantastic. I appreciate your work, and I think maybe I'll be able to talk to you more now. So that's good, because I haven't talked to you in a while. I miss our conversations. I think Jennifer?
Well,
Just a final comment. Dr. Nunez is one of the most effective and competent individuals I've known, and to hear him admit that there's a learning curve for something new makes me feel a lot better. So thank you for that, Dr. Nunez.
you are as equally talented, and don't give yourself enough credit. You are an amazing board member. And I'm sure
I would agree.
I'm sure they'll never let you go. You're going to be involved somehow.
We're trying to keep her in some fashion. Well, I don't see any other comments from the board online or here, so maybe we can, make a motion.
Yeah, I'd like to move that the California Veterinary Board recommend Dr. Mark Nunez for re-election to the AAVSB Board of Directors at the election coming this September.
Great, I'll second that. Okay, so let's open that up for public comment in the room, please.
Hi, Grant Miller, CVMA. Just a question, either for Dr. Nunez or for the board. I'm unfamiliar with the nomination process for this particular association, but would it improve his chances if the CVMA were to write him an endorsement letter, because we'd be willing to do so if he needed that?
I'm sure that's fine. I would be honored to have a letter from the CVMA that we can include in the application package, nomination package.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Miller. Moderator, can you open it up to the public online, please?
Yes, this is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. For those who are logged in and would like to participate, click the question mark inside of the square, typically lower right corner of your WebEx screen, and type the word comment in the text field that appears. Make sure it goes to all panelists before you click that send button. If you're calling in, you can raise your hand by pressing *3 to raise your virtual hand. At this time, no request for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please. Okay, with that, let's call for a vote.
Dr. Solcito?
Yes.
Ms. Buller?
Aye.
Dr. Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Ms. Ferber?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Fantastic. Congratulations, Mark. We'll be there to cheer you
Oh,
on.
Thank you. I miss you all
Yes.
terribly. But I'll see you in Kansas City.
Yes. And let me know if there's anything I can do to help, okay?
Okay.
All right.
I'll mute myself and stick around for a little bit and watch you guys.
Well, you take care, Mark. Bye. Okay, I think should we go back and just get the minutes?
Oh, sure.
We're just going to go back through to agenda item 3, review and approval of the January 25th to 26th board meeting minutes. I know Ms. Bowler had some comments that she wanted to make.
And thank you. I gave it to Tim. Are you going to put it up? One is a statement that I think if it's verbatim what the person said, then we leave it in the minutes. It just was awkward and it looked like it was missing a word or two. Tim, you're going to, and one is just a loose hanging letter.
Sorry. There's a question on page 15 regarding overwhelm, the level of overwhelm. I'll be listening to the audio and verifying that's what was said.
Yeah, my thought was maybe it is overwhelming and is reflected or something. It looks like it's missing a couple of words there. It's not going to change the text of it.
And the other comment was there's the letter here that I'll need to listen to and to clarify.
Just little teeny things.
Great. We rely on you to fix it. Yes, Dr. Nolan.
Yeah, I had a similar, I read a few things and I thought, and then, but you go back to the video and you're like, man, that's what we said. Yeah. But I did have a question on page 5. In the middle of the page, it starts with Dr. Bradbury and then it goes on, and I think that's supposed to say Dr. Brady. Because it says Dr. Bradbury thanks Ms. Mancuso. He stated outreach would be a priority, and then it goes on to say what I thought Dr. Brady said.
Yeah, good catch.
Okay.
Yes, I don't remember saying those things. Not that that hasn't happened before.
Well, and I think if it was you, it would have to say she said this and that. So I'm pretty sure it was Dr. Brady.
Okay.
But can I add very, very good, very complete notes? Well done.
Yeah, thank you. I don't see any other board members online raising their hand. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve with as amended and reviewed on the language. Is that appropriate, Tara?
And I can second that.
Fantastic. Okay, let's open it up for public comment. There's none here in the room. Moderator, can you please open it up online, please?
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions will be on the screen shortly. If you would like to participate, click that question mark inside the square, typically lower right corner of your WebEx screen. Type comment and make sure it goes to all panelists. If you're calling in, press *3 from your phone to raise your hand. I do not see any requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, please, and let's call for a vote.
Dr. Solocito?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Aye.
Dr. Grant?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Ms. Ferber?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Fantastic. Okay. So now we are going to skip back to agenda item 8A2, AB 1399.
All right. Assembly Bill 1399 by Friedman. This is veterinary medicine, the VCPR, and veterinary telemedicine. The hearing date was on the 18th. It did pass. There were minor amendments, nothing substantive to the bill, that were published last night. Essentially, this VCPR does, like existing regulation, in order to do telemedicine, you have to do it within the existing VCPR. However, there's a couple major differences. This would allow the VCPR to be established via real-time video communication instead of the physical hands-on. It also makes it so the VCPR is not condition-specific. So this does differ quite a bit from the existing regulations and the regulations that the board just approved in January as well. So with that, I will turn it over to the board for discussion.
Tara.
Just to clarify, the board approved amendments that would add the VCPR to the Business and Professions Code. So it was legislation, proposed legislation, and it also included telemedicine proposed legislation that the board approved, I think, in July 2021.
Kathy.
Should be. Of course, I am not a vet, and while I can appreciate that video conferencing has gotten way better and in the last few years and wasn't accessible at all a few years ago, I still don't understand from a perspective as an owner. I can't even think of many other than maybe behavioral issues that you can actually watch a video and a dog responding or a cat or whatever. Dermatology, you could look at it on a video, but you still need to scrape. I mean, I don't understand how you could have, and obviously it would be up to the vets, I assume, professional responsibility to say whether that could be diagnosed and treated on the phone or over the video, but there are very few conditions that don't require hands-on, and I just can't really think of any other than potentially behavior. So that's just me from a consumer standpoint.
Dr. Nolan.
I think we spent many, many hours and quite a bit of thought, and we're very, very, I think, thorough in discussing the difference between a physical exam on a human and a physical exam on an animal. They don't have a voice, and I can think of many instances where palpating the abdomen for a mass, being able to discern heart murmurs. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can't do video-wise, and I think humans have the benefit of being able to say, my gut feels weird, doc, or, my heart feels weird, or, something's not quite right, and animals can't do that. So I am very opposed to establishing a VCPR remotely.
Yeah, I have, I'm not as, I understand the desire for telemedicine and establishing a VCPR that way. I think particularly for people who are working full-time jobs and can't make it to a veterinarian, during the day. And so I understand the access to care part of it. I, like you, have had many patients come in for one issue, and on my physical exam found really large lymph nodes and diagnosed lymphoma or an anal sac tumor when I did my rectal exam, a heart murmur, an arrhythmia, pale gums, things that a client maybe you would pick up online. I do feel like lighting plays a big role in how pink the gums are. But in any case, I do worry that, with this legislation, it would basically allow for animals to never have hands on them by a veterinarian. It does, I think, importantly add where they have to recheck within 6 months versus a year before having prescriptions refilled. But I don't think it's protecting animals or consumers the way that they intend to protect them. And, again, there could be animals that go their entire life without having a veterinarian actually examine them based on the way I read it. So those are my thoughts, and I do have the same concerns. I'm wondering if it might make sense for this particular issue to take public comment before we make any motion. So, Ms. Sperber, sorry.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, I echo all of your concerns. Just reading this language makes me think that Ms. Friedman did not know that this board had already gone through the veterinary client-patient relationship regs. I agree that this is, I would be concerned about opening up liability to our veterinarians as well. Just, it feels a little nerve-wracking to think that you could establish the relationship over telemedicine without the ability to physically have hands-on the animal. I'm very conflicted about this. I do understand the access to care, but I agree with my colleagues on board that this feels like it actually will have the opposite effect and would put animals at risk as well as our vets.
Ms. Prado?
Yeah, thank you. In the text of the bill, it's a very strong teeth and enforcement, which as someone comes from the housing background that wants tenant protections and enforcement and tenant, like this is great. It's a $25,000 fine for any act, I believe, if I'm looking at the very beginning, per occurrence, per citation by the board, or a civil penalty of $25,000. The Attorney General will bring an action to enforce this section, collect fines or civil penalties. And the reason I bring that is because in the midst of what we experienced in the global pandemic that affected the entire world and shut everything down, we learned a lot of things. And there was a quote in Bell Hooks, All About Love. And I'm like, I don't have it at this moment. But at one point, what she writes about is that computers were revolutionary at one point, right? It was like, it blew our mind. And we changed, we adapted. We went forward to what it was to be able to be more human and to come from a place that we understood that we all had to uncomfortably move forward in order to make some change. And so this was passed by the legislature, knowing what they'd already known. We've given what is our comments. That's going to come back, and it's going to come back on us, and we're going to protect the consumer the best that we possibly can. I just also want to share with my fellow board members that there's very strong enforcement. And so to your point, Dr. Sperber, that there was concern for the veterinarians. I mean, they have to consciously enter what it is that, if they're going to enter into this, there's going to be a heavy fine on them, right? They're going to have to really knowingly understand what they're entering into. And this is really a cry out, and one of what I see, what we've gone through, actually like something effective of a change, of understanding what it was that we went through and doing something about it. Because right now we're in crises everywhere, what's revolutionary or not is that we're in a housing crisis, we're in a pet crisis. And I think that this is a step forward. And I do think that this is radical, but radically into a path that we're already in. Thanks.
Thank you. Dr. Solacito. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so for this, I really wanted to kind of focus on what really is the intent and how this impacts how the profession serves our consumers. And with the reality of the crisis that we're in, with access to care, and the way that this is written, where each practitioner that would employ telehealth, we actually, as it says here, to employ sound professional judgment to determine whether using veterinary telemedicine is an appropriate method for delivering medical advice or treatment to the patient. I think the way that I see this, by allowing practitioners to have that ability to make an assessment and recommendation using sound professional judgment, it's just a step forward into providing access and thinking outside of the box of how we've always established VCPR. I agree that a physical exam is critical in making diagnosis, but there are also things where, in reality, in practice, where we do rely on a lot of what our clients tell us, because there's nothing on physical examination that could actually establish what is wrong with the patient, and it's usually with the observations and the history that is being provided to us by our clients. So I'm just thinking, if this is something that we could, allow our practitioners to have that ability to have that conversation and make sound recommendation. If the recommendation is like, I really need to see your pet, that's part of the recommendation. But I don't think that the establishment of a VCPR through veterinary telemedicine is absolute in creating diagnosis and making treatment plans. This is just a step in providing that access and allowing our practitioners to expand the scope and their ability to see patients.
Jennifer. So I agree with everything that's been said on both sides. My opinion of this is obviously a VCPR established virtually is not ideal care, but in most cases it's ideal care or no care. So again, so many reasons that somebody can't physically get their pet to a veterinarian in the middle of the night, whatever it is. So I don't know how the edits on these work, but I would say maybe establishing a VCPR virtually and then giving them a shorter time frame to have the pet evaluated physically. But again, I was the one who said if the client can't get information from a veterinarian, they'll go to Dr. Google. So in this case, at least you have somebody professional making some kind of a recommendation.
Kathy. A couple, and I agree with everything everyone said as well. A couple of technical questions, and I have not seen these amendments. If I read this, first of all, where it says a veterinarian can provide the diagnosis and potential medication over a video conference as a result, if they, in their judgment, allow that to happen. Is that a California licensed veterinarian or any veterinarian? Because it just says would require a veterinarian who practices veterinary telemedicine, among other things, yada, da, da, da.
So if they're practicing veterinary medicine and the patient's in California, they'd have to be licensed.
They have to be licensed, okay, and so there'd be. And then secondly, I noticed on this, if a prescription medication is issued, they're required in 6 months to do another examination, but that also can be virtual. It seems to me that when you do medication, there are other issues that can come up, and I wonder if they'd consider having that be an in-person. I mean, it seems like another virtual. You can have side effects from medication that you're not seeing, like kidney problems and things like that need to be evaluated in different ways, and virtual is not going to do it. So I just wondered about it from the vet perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, if we're honest about it, a lot of those side effects, if you ask the right questions, you'll get to the fact that there are some side effects, and this, to me, does at least have a reconnection with the client and the patient, and you would get a look, it would be a video look, to see, oh, all of their hair is gone and they have a big pot belly, and you've been from the prednisone, for example, are they drinking more water and things like that. So I think that yes, again, back to the ideal, it would be ideal to have a in-person. I think that, to me, it would not, it would kind of, I don't think that will be put into this bill, because the whole idea is that there isn't a strong requirement for seeing them in person, but it does, I think, I listened to the, was it a webinar that was the AAVSB discussion on this, and I really was swayed when I, to at least consider establishing a VCPR virtually by some of the practitioners in other states that were doing it, and the notion that it really is still allowing a veterinarian to, the veterinarian can make the decision like, oh, this is kind of beyond a telehealth or a telemedicine appointment. And so I agree with Jennifer. I agree with what's been said so far, too. I do think it might be helpful to work with the author on this bill rather than against it. And I think that some of the important things to try and hash out would be having a facility that is sort of that they need to be associated with, so that, because some of the, if you say, oh, you need to be seen, that's not very helpful if they can't get into a clinic, or, and they're like, well, where can I be seen? And they're like, I don't know, I think that having some assurance that there is, that if you're practicing telemedicine, you have an association with a place that is willing to take those patients in a timely fashion versus just kind of willy-nilly. So I think that would be an important safeguard. I agree with Ms. Prado about how this is, really this is coming, and this is something that is going to happen, whether it be this bill or one in the future. And I think the way that we help shape it will actually be more beneficial to the consumers than if we just fully oppose it and say it's not, we just don't agree with it. And so those are kind of some of my thoughts after listening to you guys and everything. Yeah, Ms. Nolan? Dr. Nolan? Oh, Dr. Grant.
I know it's a conflicting issue. I have personal experience with setting up a website for horses that have gait abnormalities, and we get input from all over the world, actually, and they send videos and talk, and they're not that accurate. And they're trying to make a good decision on it to protect the animal, which in turn is protecting the owner's investment emotionally and financially. It puts you in jeopardy. And I can see in an emergency situation with a horse or a cow, or whatnot, they've got a broken leg or colic or whatnot. Yeah, you can take a look, you know, put your camera on it. Yeah, you need to get that horse in there or get someone out to see it. But I get a lot of inquiries, and people don't read all the information that are on the websites. And I think I'm reluctant to give people just an easy pass. Just going to call somebody, they're going to give me a shot or tell me something. That's really not doing the animal that good. And I can see, I haven't read this over as well as I should perhaps, but there should be a clause in there for emergency to advise people, like, here's my horse is thrashing around the ground or whatnot. Yeah, you need to get a veterinarian out or get it into a veterinarian.
There's definitely that's in there where both, I mean, I believe that's in there where, you can maybe correct me, but I believe that, you know, it's meant to be if somebody calls for a telemedicine appointment, then, and the doctors, like, this is beyond telemedicine, I mean, they would tell them, you need to be seen immediately. So, Dr. Nolan.
Thank you. And I think that Dr. Grant was a great lead up to my next comment, which is we have a lot of teleconsultation, teletriage, we already practice this extensively in our practices. And so I think it's important to note, when you read the bill, it sounds like, oh, we don't do any of this and we really need it, it's desperate and we need it. I really think the crux of this bill, I support all of it except for establishing the VCPR without hands on the animal. So I really think it's important to realize that we already are allowed by law to do a lot of this stuff, and it's just the VCPR that is really the kicker. I think we all really are influenced by personal experience, and I was in Europe a year ago or so, and I got COVID, and then I was told I couldn't get back on the airplane to come home until I had a doctor examine me and tell me that I was cleared to go. And so in England, this was in London, they said, oh, no problem, you just pay your 70 pounds and fill out this questionnaire and the doctor will sign you off. And I was like, so you're just going to take my word for it that I don't have a fever anymore, that I don't feel sick anymore? Oh, yeah, that's fine. And if you feel sick, the doctor will have a teleconference with you. So I guess I'm a little nervous about the road we're going down, and I think that if we're talking about consumer protection and protecting animals, I am as passionate as anyone about access to care. I just feel like our mission is to protect the animals and the humans, and at this point, in my mind, that's a line I can't go over. You know, that's the line I struggle with. So that's my story.
Tara, do you want to go first?
Yeah. Two things with respect to Ms. Prada's discussion about sufficient enforcement with the potential to issue citations. That provision in the bill would amend the pharmacy law so that the pharmacy board could issue citations against a veterinarian who dispenses or furnishes dangerous drugs on the internet without having a good faith prior examination, as would be effectively defined in this bill, to be an exam over video. So I just want to clarify the citation piece, that would be enforced by the pharmacy board. But also, when this board was crafting its telemedicine provisions in July of 2021, and then readopting that legislative proposal with the VCPR this past January, the meeting materials make note of the federal VCPR requirements for examinations. And my concern is that this bill would attempt to authorize veterinarians to examine an animal to establish the VCPR in a way that federal law does not authorize. So there's, question remains why the sponsors aren't pursuing federal legislation rather than attempting to change California law and putting veterinarians at risk in their DEA registrations for prescribing or dispensing or furnishing medication that would violate federal law. And I'm specifically referring to 21 USC 360B and 21 CFR Part 530. Both of those are referenced in the board's July 2021 board meeting materials for the telemedicine legislative proposal.
Kathy? Thank you, and thank you, Tara. That one of the questions I had was, I think, and again, I've read what I have, but not the amendments, and I haven't looked that carefully at it. Under this, is it envisioned that a veterinarian, through a video consult, can prescribe any type of medication, pain medication, antibiotics, whatever, be as a result of a video conference? Because that kind of flies in the face on the antibiotic side in some respects of, each antibiotic, different things are resistant to different antibiotics, et cetera, plus I thought, we already have areas where we're trying to not prescribe as much antibiotics without being real specific, and can they provide opiates and pain meds?
I didn't see any provision that had exemptions to certain drugs, but.
Okay, so it could do anything?
I certainly am not a person that reads these and
yeah, no,
regularly, so.
Right. And then the other thing is, and I realize, and this is a very tough question, it's whether an animal gets any care at all or gets some care, and relying on the judgment, good judgment, which I trust all my veterinarians to provide, and whether they can diagnose something effectively through a video, and knowing that if they can't, they would tell somebody, you need to go in. Now, when it's a tele situation, that person can be in Southern California and the client can be in Northern California. And Christina, you brought up a good point about where do you go if you need to go in. So I understand the problem, and I know that things are changing, but I also know, as Dr. Nolan said, that for many years I have sent videos and pictures to my vets and they've told me one thing or another, come in, don't come in, this is what it is. So it's definitely possible now. I just worry that you've got people having an entire veterinary experience without seeing a veterinarian, animals having a veterinary experience without seeing a veterinarian ever. And I'm wondering if, they would consider requiring any kind of a in-person exam.
Okay. Dr. Nolan, and then I think I want to open it up to public comment so that we can hear that and then discuss it, but go ahead.
Well, it's my impression upon reading this bill that you need to be licensed in California, but you don't need to reside in California. You could be in India or the Philippines, or you could be anywhere and be providing this service. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just talk about?
Yeah, I'm going to have Jessica.
There's been some questions too about enforceability of this, and thank you, Tara, for clarifying about the $25,000. That doesn't apply to us, so that wouldn't help us. But when we're looking at telemedicine, as Dr. Nolan and all of you have mentioned, this is a tool that veterinarians can use today, and how that happens, and this bill does provide that. It's basically they're leaving it up to the professional judgment of the veterinarian. So if the veterinarian starts the video conference and decides, you know what, I can't, you need to come in. So in the scenario that Dr. Grant mentioned, it would be up to the veterinarian to decide whether or not they have to come in and do an in-person exam. If we were to get a complaint that a patient was harmed due to the treatment, and then we investigate and we found that the veterinarian shouldn't have continued a VCPR or the examination treatment via telemedicine. That could be something that we would look at as a negligent act. I do think that the enforceability is here. We use it just as we do today with the veterinarian using it as a tool. But as far as providing substandard care, we would have it under our normal ability to enforce against negligent acts. But still, the question remains about establishing that VCPR in person.
Dr. Nolan?
Would it be important then to somewhere indicate that video conference establishing the VCPR was recorded so that we would have access to it? Is that something that should be addressed?
I think that would be a great recommendation. Okay, I think I'd like to open this up to public comment and hear what the public has to say in the room.
Hi, Grant Miller, CVMA. I'm actually going to abbreviate my comments on this bill, largely because a number of the points that I wanted to make have already been reflected in thoughtful discussion here. But what I would like to do is encourage you to please go to the CVMA website, to our advocacy section. And in our legislative update, we have our opposition letter as well as our opposition talking points. They largely reflect the conversation today. But officially, the California Veterinary Medical Association is opposed to AB 1399, which will allow a veterinarian-client-patient relationship to be established by electronic means without an in-person examination of the animal patient or medically appropriate and timely visits to the premises where the animals are kept. It would also allow prescription drugs, including antibiotics, to be prescribed to patients solely through telemedicine appointments. I'm going to skip a whole bunch here. According to a 2020 survey conducted by the College of Veterinarians of Ontario, one of the only jurisdictions in North America in which a VCPR may be established via telemedicine, the most common type of medication prescribed through telemedicine is antibiotics. In California, a concerted effort is taking place to curb the inappropriate use of antibiotics in veterinary medicine and to combat antibiotic resistance. As you know, we actually are the only profession that has a mandated continuing education requirement for the judicious use of antibiotics, and that was pursuant to SB 27 and SB 835, which took place in 2014 and 2015. Our concern about the use of antibiotics via telemedicine is not a theoretical concern. In a recent continuing education seminar conducted by the CVMA on the judicious use of antibiotics in dermatologic cases, so intuitively you would think, well, geez, we can just look at skin, and there it is, we can see it on the screen. We asked 230 veterinarians to look at photos of 3 skin conditions in dogs. Attendees were asked, based on what they saw, whether they would prescribe antibiotics in each case. In all 3 instances, 78 to 86% of veterinarians indicated that they would prescribe antibiotics for treatment, yet none of the skin conditions were bacterial in nature. If examinations were conducted in person, the veterinarian would be able to exercise the ability to perform a more extensive exam and take examples for laboratory testing in order to form a more accurate diagnosis and treatment plan. This is but one example of how we feel the use of telemedicine may be of great concern. I'm going to skip back, though, sorry about this, and end with this final statement. The CVMA does believe that telemedicine has its place in veterinary medicine and supports California's current law, which permits its use to manage care of established patients through follow-up consultation, prescriptions, and triaging critical cases. However, this bill proposes completely eliminating the initial in-person exam or premises visit and for animal patients, which is deeply concerning. Thank you.
Thank you. Moderator, can you open it up to the folks online?
Yes, this is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. Members of the public who are joined via WebEx, if you would like to participate, click that question mark inside of the square, typically lower right corner of your WebEx screen. In the text field that appears, click on type in comment and click send. Make sure it goes to all panelists. And if you are calling in, press *3 from your phone to raise your virtual hand. I do have individual identified as Nancy Elbridge. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. I will send a request to unmute your microphone, and I will provide you a 15-second warning before the 3 minutes are up. Request has been sent.
I think part of the problem here with telemedicine is the definition of the VCPR. In all the years of practice that I've been in, until recently, the VCPR was determined to be not condition-based. As long as the veterinarian had examined the animal patient in person and agreed with the client to take responsibility for that animal's care, the VCPR had been established and then was considered to be in place for a year. And somehow recently it's been redetermined that it has to be per condition. And I think that's part of what creates this telemedicine problem. If the VCPR was in place for a year and the client had been in it within a year and then needed a telemedicine appointment, then that would make a lot more sense because we know for sure the veterinarian is familiar with the patient. So I would encourage you to reconsider how you are defining VCPR, and I think it could solve a lot of these problems.
This is the moderator. No further requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you. Okay, is there any further discussion or a motion?
Like I do.
Yep.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, I just want to, I'm like, well, that's great that the pharmacy board enforces that. I'm like, and that's great that there is enforcement. And I think I understand everyone's concern as well, right? It's also, if someone can't access a veterinarian, what do they do? And I understand that we already have all these other ways that we can do it. That this is the way that if they can't have any access, because it's happened, we saw it happen, right? And I'm like, and I found the quote with bell hooks. I'm like, so I'll end with this. I'm like, because why not? Fear of radical change leads many citizens of our nation to betray their minds and heart. Yet we are all subject to radical changes every day. We face them by moving through fear. These changes are usually imposed by the status quo. For example, revolutionary new technologies have led us all to accept computers. Our willingness to embrace this unknown shows that we are all capable of confronting fears of radical change, that we can cope. An overall culture embrace of love ethic would mean that we would all oppose much of the public policy conservatives condone and support. Society's collective fear of love must be faced if we are going to lay claim to a love ethic that can inspire us and give us the courage to make necessary changes. Thank you.
Is that a motion?
I'd like to, I would make a motion. I'm not sure that.
Yes, go ahead.
Passed, but I would like to make a motion that we oppose unless amended. And my amendment would be concerning an in-person VCPR establishment.
Just so I clarify the amendment, Dr. Noland, are you saying that the proposed amendment would be to eliminate that it can be done virtually, or that it has to be done in person?
Yes, well, isn't that saying the same thing, or am
right? I just wanted to make sure what the proposed amendment is.
Yes, it would be to eliminate the ability to establish a VCPR by telepathic. That's not right. By telemedicine.
That's a whole different issue.
That would be really bad. No, you know what I mean.
Thank you. And just to clarify, Dr. Grant, you agree with that proposed amendment, correct?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so then we're going to open that up to public comment again.
Hi, Grant Miller, CVMA. Thank you very much for that motion. To clarify, though, the entire crux of the bill is to establish a VCPR without in-person exam. So wouldn't it just be a flat-out oppose? Because to say oppose unless amended, amended would mean that you want them to do the exact thing that the bill is trying to not do. So would it be the concept of like the COVID waiver, where we said if you've seen the animal in person for one condition, and this gets at what Nancy was saying, where we don't have the condition-specific VCPR, but that if you've seen it for one condition, you can then use telemedicine for other conditions as you see fit? Would it be something like that, or would it just be a flat-out oppose? Because saying, with all due respect, just saying we want you to have an in-person exam, you're telling them that you 180 degrees do not like their bill. Does that make sense?
But Dr. Miller, I was trying to make my colleagues happier. They don't want to oppose the bill. They want.
Sorry.
So I was trying to help them.
Oh,
But you're absolutely right. It is a little bit ridiculous because it is the crux of the bill.
It's not ridiculous. I want to make sure that we're really clear on moving forward with where this board is. There's been a lot of talk about the COVID waiver that was the 18-month waiver that we had, which essentially allowed a modified version. I didn't know if that's what you were referring to in terms of needing the initial in-person exam or not. And so I just want to clarify that if you were to do oppose unless amended to require an in-person exam for every condition, then you're just opposed to the bill, essentially.
Well, and I'm well aware that as we go through the process, we do a lot of, hopefully, dialogue with the sponsors of the bill. And so I think coming back at them with something that says, we're not flat out opposed, let's talk, is sort of where I'm heading. You're right, there are a lot of nuances that we could talk about with that, but I'm not sure I'm ready to spell them all out.
So the 1399 hearing actually took place during our MDC meeting, so none of us had the privilege of being able to hear it live, but the author of the bill did indicate that she would like to sit down with stakeholders on the bill, especially the CVMA. So I think that that's a given, that she understands that there are serious concerns from the veterinary community, both from the AVMA, the CVMA, and others, and that we all do need to sit down and talk about it. So I'll leave you with that and decide whether or not you'd like an opposed position, or if it's amended, what would it be amended
Again, I don't feel qualified to really tell everyone this is exactly how I want you to amend the bill. I just really think it's important that they understand that we have serious concerns, and it's regarding the establishment of a VCPR remotely.
Great. Can we open it up to the public online, please, for their public comment? Oh.
This is the moderator. This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. Instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate and you're logged in, click on the question mark inside of the square, typically lower right corner of your WebEx screen. Type the word comment in the text field that appears and click send. Make sure it goes to all panelists before clicking the send button. If you are calling in, press *3 from your phone to raise your virtual hand. I do have individual identified as CVMA. I'm going to send a request to mute your microphone, and I will provide you a 15-second alert before your 3 minutes are up. You're unmuted.
Hi, Dan Baxter from the CVMA. Just briefly to follow on Dr. Miller's comment about the hearing the other day.
Can we start over? We can't hear. I'm thinking it's Mr. Baxter.
Can you hear me okay?
Now we can. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, Dan Baxter, CVMA. Just to briefly follow on Dr. Miller's comment about the hearing the other day. I was at that hearing, and as you know, the CVMA's position is a straight oppose, but notwithstanding that, we signaled a willingness to work with the author. The author signaled a willingness to work with us and other stakeholders. So the taking of a flat oppose position is not somehow mutually exclusive with forthcoming dialogue. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the moderator. No further requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, I have, Kathy had a comment and then Jennifer.
I was just, to Dr. Nolan's initial motion, I'm wondering if we should just, the motion should be oppose unless amended. The discussion today has brought out a lot of potential amendments to this. In addition, adding in at some point an in-person or changing that part of the VCPR, limitation on prescription drugs that you can do. You know, there's a lot of good discussion I thought we've had here, and assuming the author is open to that kind of dialogue, I don't know, I know we usually give a list of what amendments we'd like, and maybe just the simple oppose unless amended without mentioning the VCPR, I mean, the in-person VCPR would be an appropriate motion at this point, and then go into the list later.
So in order to provide an oppose unless amended, the next question is, what amendments do you want? And so if the board doesn't agree, I would not be able to speak for the board on these are the amendments. So the board would have to say, these are the amendments we would like. And they don't have to be necessarily be specific, it's just address these concerns.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking, is the board could oppose unless amended to resolve the board's concerns regarding the bill's lack of any in-person examination of the animal. And then in this motion, you could then authorize the executive committee or the board's executive officer to participate in stakeholder meetings to continue working on the bill.
I'm happy to amend my, my motion. I had the same concern as I don't feel like I know exactly the right answer to amend it. I just feel like we do have concerns about the in-person establishment of the VCPR and other things that we have talked about here today. So do we need to make a specific list of those things?
No.
Or just,
This is Maria.
Jennifer,
You don't need to make a specific list. I mean, honestly, because the amendments are going to evolve as you have conversations with the author's office. So I think if we can make a motion that gives Jessica the power to participate in stakeholder conversations so that she can frame the amendments, help us frame the amendments, I think that would be the most prudent.
Okay.
We know the general idea of the concern.
And then, Diana, I see you up there, but Jennifer had a comment first. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you, sorry. It is my last opportunity to have some input, so I'm going to say I don't totally oppose this. I'm actually not opposed to the VCPR established virtually. My recommendation will be establish it virtually. My thought is emergency situations, and then have a time frame that they have to be seen in person, days, a week, whatever it is. So even though I don't oppose it, I would be in favor of the oppose unless amended. It's just the problem of finding out what amendments we want. So.
Diana?
Yeah, I just also want to, again, remind us that we have a duty to the consumers. Our duty isn't to the veterinarians, our duty isn't even to ourselves. Our duty is to the consumers to ensure that the consumers and their pets, the pets that they're taking care of, are going to get treatment, are going to get access to care. And so the amendment that we're trying to, everyone's talking about requiring in person, it's just what Brent Miller was saying. It's completely opposed to what this bill is trying to establish, which is you don't have to see the initial person, the pet in person. That's not what that's establishing. This is creating access to care for everybody. And I know that it's fearful to think like, oh, what if they're never going to see a veterinarian? And those cases just aren't, perhaps that occurs, and then we'll see that, right? And then they'll come to us and it's disciplined if something's going to occur. It's just to oppose this bill and then say we're going to work with the author, I believe is disingenuous to the author and disingenuous to what it is that we're supposed to be doing to the consumers. I think that really it should be support, and then that author is going to realize that we're willing to work with them, that we're willing to have a meaningful conversation with them. The continuing to oppose something isn't going to get us anywhere.
Ms. Berber?
So, I do want to give this caveat. I am in the building a lot. If we support her bill, we will lose all ability to negotiate any amendments that we think we need. They will just say, great, they support, let's go. So I would recommend either oppose unless amended, which gives us the opportunity, which basically says we have some conflicts. And you can do that gracefully, no different than our partners have done, which is, hey, totally respect what you're trying to accomplish. And we have some concerns we'd like to work with you on. The other option is support if amended, which is like, again, we're almost there. We have some things we need to discuss because we just went through this last year. We have some concerns. But if we just do a straight support, we will lose any ability to get anything in bill that we think we need. So that would be my advice.
And I just, I agree with that. I am not personally in favor, this bill is written, I would not support. But I think there are a lot of different types of amendments and nuanced amendments that can be added. If we do a oppose unless amended, of course, once the amendments are done, the board meets again in July. Obviously, the bill continues to move through, but the board will have another opportunity to make a final decision on the bill as amended, and if the amendments meet the concerns that have been expressed today, I think.
I think for me, and the executive committee and I can definitely work with the author's office after the board delegates that authority to do it. I think for me, it doesn't sound like everybody is aligned on what those concerns are. And so it would be helpful, no, we don't need specific amendments, but what general concerns would you like to see addressed? Because I'm not hearing a unanimous consensus on that. So in order to delegate authority to us to work with the author's office, we want to make sure we're addressing the concerns as the board, not as individual concerns.
Can I? Yeah. There is another potential opportunity, and I would like to suggest that we look at that. And we have in the past had the executive committee talk to a sponsor and then called another meeting of the board. And I would like to strongly encourage us to look at that as an option so that we have because I think you're exactly right. We're all kind of on different pages here. So is that a possibility?
I really like that. So what you're suggesting, so I'm clear, is that we have a stakeholder meeting and discuss it before the July meeting.
Well, I wouldn't call it a stakeholder meeting. I would say that the executive officer and the executive committee would be able to talk to the sponsors and have a dialogue about what the problems we think there are, what the many different opinions we have, and just see what they might be willing to work with or not, and then bring that back to the board for a further discussion of the board.
In July?
Yes, before July.
Okay, so then we would have our own public board meeting to discuss that.
So she's recommending an off-calendar meeting, and as you all know, we are looking at an off-calendar meeting anyway to appoint an MDC member, so perhaps we can try to do it at the same time during that board meeting. It'll still be a publicly noticed board meeting.
Okay, I think the only challenge is that some of those, we'd have to look at those dates again, I think, for the timing of it. But yes, I'm totally open to that. I think it would be really helpful if we were able to talk with the author about some of the concerns we had, and do that. I like that. And so in that case, for now, did you want to amend your amended motion?
Not really. I want to make a motion that we oppose unless amended, and that the general concerns that have been brought up will be addressed prior to an off-calendar meeting. Is that what I have to say? For instance, Dr. Miller had a really creative kind of thought that I hadn't thought of, so I think there might be more to talk about, after you talk to the sponsor.
This is still a bit of a vague motion, so I think it's oppose unless amended to resolve concerns raised during today's meeting, including, and we need a list. We need, what is it that are your big ticket items? Is it in-person examination?
Well, that's one of them. We could start there.
Kathy?
Is there a limit on the type of conditions that can be reviewed video or the type of medications that can be prescribed? I mean, these are some of the discussion items we just had.
Can I make a suggestion that we just oppose this and then we talk with the author? Because it seems clear to me that they will still work with us with a straight oppose, and then because we aren't as clear as we need to be on all of the different issues, and I think...
Okay, do I need to rescind my motion, or do I just change it, amend it to be opposed?
I think you can change it.
Okay, well, because of what you just said, Dr. Bradbury, that we could oppose it and have a important dialogue, I would be happy to do that, but I really would also, after I make this motion, like to encourage us to have another meeting about it without it being part of the motion. So I would like to amend my motions, that sounds good. I would like to amend my motion to oppose this bill.
Are you okay with
Dr.
that?
Grant, yeah.
Great. I think we still have to have public comment again because it's been amended. So public comment.
So before we do that, do you want to authorize the executive committee and the executive officer to have conversations with the author and stakeholders about the bill?
Yes, and I would also like to request a meeting after that, prior to our July meeting.
Okay, so the motion is to oppose the bill, authorize the board's executive committee and executive officer to work with the bill author and stakeholders. Are we working with them, or are we engaging in conversation right now and then reporting back to the board at an off-calendar meeting?
Yes, I think we're engaging with conversation to try to come to an agreement that we could all live with, and then present that back to the board to see how if the board's okay with that. I just think it's too complex to just allow the executive committee to come up with a solution and run with it. That's my 2 bits worth.
I agree, especially considering the differing opinions that are on the board. So I think that's fair. Okay, are we in a place where I can have public comment?
All right, so to restate, it's a motion to oppose the bill, authorize the board's executive committee and executive officer to engage in conversations with the bill's author and stakeholders regarding the concerns raised today, and have an off-calendar meeting to further discuss the bill.
Kathy?
Redundant to say oppose the bill as currently written? I mean, I guess it is. I know we're saying that in the latter part of your motion, but to kind of further reflect what the board is thinking.
So whenever we do position letters, we do based on the version of the bill, and so we would reference that. So if, say, tomorrow the bill's changed, it would only have applied to that.
Okay, I think we're back to public comment on the new motion.
Hi, Grant Miller, CVMA. So from a public policy standpoint, the opposed position is the best position that you can be in at this point to signal to the author that you would like to have discussions. As Ms. Sperber stated, anytime they see support, you're done. Like, they're not interested in hearing you. And remember, this bill sailed through its first policy committee, which is a policy committee. That's where they look at the substance of the bill. It sailed through with not any problems at all. So they're full steam ahead, and they don't have any reason to listen to somebody if the person is signaling support. So just because you signal oppose does not mean that you're opposed to the concept of telemedicine in veterinary medical practice. It just means that you have some legitimate concerns that you'd like to talk to the author. We have already set up quite a bit of groundwork to make that happen. Remember also that they're listening to this meeting. They are out there and they know that there are some legitimate concerns. I will also tell you that a lot of the concerns that you have expressed today, the internal dialogue, these are the same things that the CVMA has talked about. And so I feel like there's a great opportunity for stakeholders to come together and express that, perhaps this needs to be linked to a registered veterinary premises in the state of California so that that veterinary premises can be responsible for providing follow-up care to the animal. Perhaps there needs to be a limitation on how many antibiotics we can give. Remember also that federal law prohibits us from prescribing controlled substances via telemedicine. That's for all healthcare providers. It's not possible to do. So I think there's a lot of conversation that still can be had with this author, and I believe that she will be receptive. She's a horse owner, actually, and she'll be receptive to hearing that. So I think that Oppose is really the best possible place you can be at this point in order to get your voice heard. Thank you.
Just to clarify, I just want to make sure for the record that both Dr. Nolan and Dr. Grant are in approval of the revised motion that Tara read.
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Moderator, can you open up to the online community?
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. Those who are participating via WebEx, if you would like to join the public comment, click the question mark, typically lower right corner of your WebEx screen, type the word comment in the text field that appears, and make sure it goes to all panelists before clicking send. You can raise your hand if you're calling in by pressing *3. So I do have individual identified as Brittany Benesi. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. I'm going to send a request to unmute your microphone, and I will give you a 15-second warning before the 3 minutes are up. You're unmuted.
I'm the Senior Legislative Director for the ASPCA's Western Division, a co-sponsor on AB 13.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you very well. Initially we could, and then you're very low volume.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Am I coming in any clearer?
You're going in and out. Try again.
Now?
Yes, that's nice medium volume there.
Okay, I'll keep my fingers crossed. I want to thank you for the discussion this morning. It has been really fruitful to be able to hear the concerns and considerations, as well as the level of support for the use of telemedicine as a key tool in improving access to care in California. A couple of points I would like to highlight. There has been reference to the waivers in California for the use of telemedicine to establish a VCPR. I'd like to recognize that that throughout the country, state and local governments, or federal and state governments provided flexibility for the VCPR establishment in stronger ways than California did. And the point that there has not been a single report of telemedicine leading to harm to pets as a result is true across the country as well as in Canadian provinces. So would like that to be considered. I'd also like to highlight survey data released by the ASPCA this month that indicated just the level of crisis that we're talking about. Approximately 1/4 of respondents reported wanting or needing veterinary care in the past 2 years and being unable to obtain it. So that is nearly 25% of pets in a survey with over 5,000 responses who went untreated and suffered unnecessarily, potentially with increased medical needs as a result, more expensive costs to their owners, and inevitably some either experiencing premature death or being relinquished to shelters due to the gaps in access. Nearly 70% of those who had that experience had an interest in using veterinary telehealth if it were available. And 2 out of 3 said that their pet would see a vet more often if telemedicine were an option. So I Want to thank the board again for the discussion this morning. We look forward to engaging in these stakeholder conversations and identifying hopefully language where we can come to agreement. I'd like to point the board to Senate Bill 1053 in Arizona, where the AVMA has come to a neutral position with the allowance for a video telemedicine virtual VCPR, and hope that that's something that we might be able to conduct similarly here in California. We look forward to working with you. Thank you.
This is the moderator. Next individual identified as CVMA. I'm going to send a request to mute your microphone. Request has been sent.
Yes, hello, Dan Baxter for the CVMA. Just very briefly in response to Ms. Fennessy's comment just now. I take strong issue with the notion that there has been a great relaxation in the standards attending to this, especially the suggestion that many states allow for the initiation of the VCPR through telemedicine modalities. That is facially incorrect. Late in 2020, I analyzed every state's law relative to this and did a lengthy memo that synopsized my findings. I believe that letter is actually in the record at some point during one of the VMB's meetings. And the relevant takeaways from that analysis is that there is only one state as of late 2020 that allowed for the use of telemedicine to establish the VCPR. That was the state of Tennessee. There were two other states that appeared to contemplate that a VCPR could be established exclusively via telemedicine modalities. That was Idaho and Oklahoma, although those two states' laws were not crystal clear on the subject. I believe since then there has been one state, I think it might be Michigan, that has gone in this direction, but I just demur to the notion that there is some sort of vast sample size of states that allow the initiation of a VCPR through telemedicine modalities. That is absolutely incorrect. Thank you.
This is the moderator. No additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, please. I think there is something written on the screen that we should we read that, or there's a comment?
I can read that for you if you would like.
Yeah, because it's a comment from somebody else, I believe.
Yes.
Oh, Charity. Well, go ahead and read it.
Yes, a comment from the first public member who spoke. The comment was, as well as Virginia and New Jersey.
Okay. Any additional conversation? Yep,
No
Dr.
additional
Nolan.
requests or, oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, yes, you can close it. Sorry, moderator.
I just think I really want to make it very clear that I think that the survey that was referred to by one of the public members about access to care and the reasoning behind it was monetarily driven. The majority of people that can't really get access to care, that can't afford access to care, and that it may or may not allow telemedicine to help with that problem. Because I think we would be remiss in thinking that telemedicine would be free.
Correct. Okay, I think we can take a vote.
Dr. Solocito. Ms. Bowler?
Aye.
Dr. Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
No.
Ms. Berber?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Dr. Solocito?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate everybody's comments. I think we might need a quick 10-minute break. It's 10:49. Let's come back at 11. Okay, if we can all gather. Sorry, I just don't want to delay any further today. So we are now on agenda item 8A3, Senate Bill 372.
So Senate Bill 372, Menjivar, sorry if I messed up that last name. Department of Consumer Affairs, licensing, registrant records, name and gender changes. This requires the boards within DCA to update licensees or registrants' records, including records contained within an online license verification system, to include the licensees or registrants' updated legal name or gender if the board receives government-issued documentation as described from the licensee or registrant demonstrating the licensee or registrant's legal name or gender has been changed. This requires the board to, we would have to reissue any documents that the board has posted online, including this would, in our reading, by our, I mean, when we meet with DCA, we call them legislative roundtables. We discuss pending legislation that's before us. This one was discussed at length. Currently, licensees are able to update their name by completing an application, providing the documentation, we update their name. The difference with this process is that we would have to update their name and then remove any former reference to any reference to their former name, and including any disciplinary documents. We would have to remove the reference to that former name. So, as a consumer protection board, the concern would be that it's not clear how then the consumer would be able to find any disciplinary history if that name was no longer available. Honestly, consumers don't memorize license numbers. They know the name. And so that would be the concern that we shared. Those concerns are also in the committee analysis that I provided to you. It's very similar concerns. But the crux of it is how consumers would be able to find publicly disclosable information, including the disciplinary documents that were required by law to post if the name is not the same anymore.
So is there not a way where it would, with this, that they would be able to, I mean, if they were searching for the current name, that would automatically get the license number, and then that license number would be able to link it to the disciplinary actions. Like, I feel like I mean, I understand the concerns, but I feel like there's a way to link it with technology. I mean, if for example, I'm Christina now, and my license number is linked to that. I changed my name to Chris Brad instead of Christina Bradbury, and somebody wants to search for anything that my name, then the license number comes up, and then anything in the license number with the name redacted. I guess I'm not seeing how that can't happen.
I would just say it's unclear whether or not board staff is going to have to go through disciplinary documents and redact and potentially insert the new name into a formal document, which the board has already issued, because right now it says under 27.583, if requested, the board shall reissue any documents conferred upon the licensee. It's unclear whether or not that's just the license or if that includes disciplinary documents, and there's redaction, but it would be very concerning to start adding information to formal documents that had already been issued. So it's just unclear, and the board already has a requirement under BPC Section 27 that it has to post enforcement actions. So is the board supposed to remove all of the discipline from that individual's licensee page online? And then a consumer, pursuant to this bill, would only be able to find out the individual's former name if the consumer submitted a complaint first. So consumers who are just investigating to see whether or not they want to use the services of a new veterinarian would not be able to see former discipline because this bill is confusing and doesn't really provide for that very well. The only way the consumer would be able to link up the former name is if they submitted a complaint against the individual with the new name. Then they could find out the former name, which, you know, seems to go against consumer protection.
I just have a clarification. So isn't it that all the discipline and, you know, would be associated with a license number? So if there's going to be a change in name, I don't see anything different with, you know, like when you get married and you decide to change your legal name versus like changing your legal name because of gender.
It has to be class go ahead.
Yeah, so like it is done now, if you were to change your married name and you search up, you can either by license number or by name, it'll come up and it'll also show you the previous name. And so what I'm saying is if the consumer doesn't know the license name or number and just knows the name and they do a license search by the new name, they won't know that there was another name that the discipline would fall under. So the discipline is no longer under that name. And to Dr. Bradbury's point, there likely is a way to still link up the prior documents, but imagine the confusion too for the consumer, because the consumer is going to look up the name that they know, and then they see documents linked to that veterinarian, but the veterinarian's name isn't on there. And so are they going to know that that discipline was tied to that person, or are they going to think it's an error because that person's not on there?
I would also say another potential issue is if a consumer receives services from a licensee under a former name, then they go to the board's website to search for the former name, that's going to be gone. So then the consumer is going to be potentially thinking, oh, this person was unlicensed and that's a problem, and potentially submitting a complaint for unlicensed practice. I mean, there's just some confusing repercussions here.
Kathy? Yep.
Yeah, I just had a question. I assume that, well, all the boards, but obviously because the mandate is for consumer protection, I understand the reasoning behind this bill very well, and I get that. It's the implementation. I assume DCA had other commentary, or the other boards had commentary. They had a hearing on the 18th. Do we know what was submitted for that? Because Tara brought up something that I hadn't thought of. I was always thinking of the linkage on the license number. But if this bill indirectly, or it does, not indirectly, directly would require every board to go back and, if there's a name change, and I'm not saying that happens a lot, but let's say it does, and redact or change the disciplinary, any posted materials about that individual by either changing the name, whatever, that is a lot of work, you know, I assume, because we're proud of the fact that it's all available online to consumers, or it should be. And I just don't know if that's an indirect or a sort of inadvertent workload issue for all the boards.
So I just looked on the analysis. I didn't see anyone registered, but I did reach out to registered in position as far as DCA boards go. But I did reach out to DCA back on April 3rd, and at that point, the Board of Registered Nursing took a support if amended position. I'm not clear on what those amendments were, but I'm not aware of any other board taking a position. That doesn't mean there haven't. I just am not aware of it.
But my second question is the consequence if this passed, that the board staff would need to go back and, for any individual that has had a name change, go back and redact or change any documentation that's posted publicly?
We would have to remove the references to the prior names. Yes.
Okay, I think Diana, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I mean, again, I also understand the intent of this bill, and I'm just reading it and thinking through all that, you all said, and then also, Tara's, I was thinking of the court documents, like if there are court documents, how do you then go through and redact those all? And I don't know if you even can't, it's all great questions in that sense, right? Do I think that we could, is it gonna take extra power to then have to link up? I would think that there'd be some creation, some system created that if somebody made a name or gender change, it'd click up and then all the past disciplinary actions could be somehow associated with that. But then all the accompanying documents to that, right? It's like when we receive all those accompanying documents, what happens to those? It's great questions of the devil's in the details, right? And so it's the implementation of this, which is getting really difficult. But I understand the intent of this bill, obviously.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, does anybody have a motion? All right. I'll make a motion to oppose this bill.
I'll second that.
Okay, do we have any public comment? No public comment in the room. Can you open it up? Oh, yes, before
Will we be the first DCA board to do so?
That I don't know.
Since, you know, you're holding your meeting in April, other boards are also meeting right now. I just sat with another board last week, and they're submitting a position, which is watch and express concerns. I mean, it's really hard to really come out against this, because on one hand, you absolutely support the need for these individuals to be able to move on with their life. That's a support, but implementing these provisions, trying to maintain the consumer protection that each board is required by statute to do. This is a consumer protection board, so you know, you can see that there needs to be a balance to strike here between the consumer protection and the protection of the licensee. So one board kind of came on, let's just watch it and submit a letter of concern.
I'd like to amend my motion to mirror that, watch and support, and rather watch and submit a letter of concern.
Yes, it really didn't roll off my tongue when I said yes to oppose for that very reason. I didn't realize we had a watch and submit a letter of concern option. So I'd like that one. I like it.
Okay, so Kathy.
And I will point out that in our memo, I think the staff memo has some suggested concerns or amendments, and maybe in the letter of concern we can talk about that. You know, in terms of allowing consumers to be able to still find the important documents, blah, blah, blah. I mean, they've pointed out a couple of the issues, so.
Yeah, I feel like it's really well stated in our memo what the concerns are. And it seems like everybody here kind of agrees with those concerns. So I feel like in this situation, we have at least a consensus of the concerns. Is there anybody in the room who would like to comment after the amendment was made? I'm not seeing anyone. Moderator, can you open it up to the public, please?
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you're logged in and would like to participate, click on the question mark inside of the square, type comments in the text field that appears. Make sure you send it to all panelists before you click the send button. If you're calling in, you can press *3 from your phone to raise your virtual hand. At this time, I see no requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you. I do just want to say that I really do appreciate the intent of this, and that is why I'd like to change, I changed that. I oppose the consumer protection aspect, that's why I oppose it, but initially I was trying to figure out a way to make it work. Okay, so we can take a vote.
Dr. Solocito?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Aye.
Dr. Grant?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Ms. Berber?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great.
All right. SB 544, Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, teleconferencing. This bill essentially allows the board to continue offering its hybrid meetings without the need to post the physical location of each member. I put in there, we roughly saved $14,000 in travel costs by being able to do this. It has increased substantially the public participation. So staff is recommending a support position on the bill.
Yes.
I'd move to support.
I'll second.
Great. Any other discussion by the board? Any public comment in the room? Moderator, can you open it up online, please?
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. Instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate, click that question mark, type comment, send to all panelists, or press *3 from your phone. I see no requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, please. Can we take a vote?
Dr. Solocito?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler? Dr. Grant?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Ms. Berber?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Motion carries. All right, the next is SB 669, Veterinarians VCPR. This bill was significantly amended, and so Tara took the pleasure of analyzing the newest revisions of the bill, so she's going to go through that and raise any concerns.
The March 21 version of the bill largely reflected the regulatory amendments the board approved in January. However, the April 18 amendments make significant changes to now include, among other things, a new definition section for purposes of these provisions only, which would add a new definition of client to mean the owner of the animal. To refresh the board's recollection at the January meeting when the board was discussing legislation for a new VCPR and telemedicine legislative proposal, defining client to just mean the owner of the animal is problematic, and that how would a veterinarian determine who the owner was, because many times there are no legal documents transferring ownership of an animal. So the board worked very diligently to create a new definition of client, and also provided for agency, authorizing a client to delegate an agent to act on their behalf to create a VCPR. So this bill kind of blows that up, creating a new definition of client, which would be difficult to determine on the veterinarian's part and potentially difficult to enforce on the board's part. It would also create a strange definition of direct supervision, which appears to create a new hybrid situation where the supervisor could be physically present at the location, or the supervisor is in the general vicinity and the supervisor is quickly and easily available. It's unclear. The bill does define supervisor to mean California licensed veterinarian, but it effectively takes the existing definition of direct supervision in California Code of Regulations, Section 2034E, subsection E, and changes it significantly just for purposes of this new section, which will create confusion with other aspects of the Veterinary Medicine Practice Act.
Tara, can I interrupt you for a second? Dr. Miller? I thought these were taken out. I'm
Not
sorry.
yet.
Not yet.
The bill has not been amended yet. I understand that CVMA has raised some concerns.
Got it. Okay, this is the 418 amendment, and we don't have it officially taken, the
Yeah,
definition
so we're just
taken out.
reviewing it.
Okay.
As currently published, this is
Okay,
what
sorry. Thank you. I just didn't want to go over all of these and then be like, oh, no, they're not in there right now. So,
They are.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'm raising all of these issues to support the author taking amendments to fix a lot of these concerns. But right now, this is what the language in the bill is and why these terms are problematic.
Sorry for the interruption.
So this bill is about authorizing a registered veterinary technician to serve as the agent of the California licensed veterinarian for purposes of administering preventive or prophylactic vaccines or medications. You know, we all recognize the need to provide access to care, especially for preventive vaccines and prophylactics, but now this proposal took what the board approved in January, and it's now going far beyond what the board thought was appropriate. And this bill would now authorize an RVT to act as an agent for the veterinarian to establish a VCPR, not just to administer preventive or prophylactic vaccines or medications, but also medications to control bacteria, which is a completely different form of veterinary treatment, which is of concern. It also removes the client disclosure provisions that the board had constructed. You know, this bill would authorize an RVT to stand in the place of the veterinarian, and clients bringing their animals in don't really know who the staff is administering the treatment. And so one of the things that we felt was important was providing notice to the client of who was administering the vaccines and just disclosing that information and receiving the client's consent. Another concern is that the bill maintains subdivision D, which is aimed at the veterinarian's prohibition of prescribing a drug for a duration that is inconsistent with the medical condition of the animal, and prescribing a drug for a duration longer than 1 year. That provision is currently in 2032.1, and you know, while it was important to include it in the prior version because it would have inserted the VCPR regulation into statute, now that this bill is aiming VCPR agency at RVTs and removing many of the other provisions of the VCPR, maintaining subdivision D doesn't really make sense. Those are the big picture problems with this bill, and you know, potentially we understand there are ongoing discussions about the bill, which it may be significantly amended.
Jessica.
I just wanted to elaborate. You mentioned about the ability to treat bacteria. It's also for RVCs to provide treatment for bacterial diseases and viruses, which means the shift was for the preventative measures for vaccines. It was healthy animals. This is now ability to treat sick animals. So I think that's where the shift happened. But it's my understanding that could have been a mistake, and it's been there's discussions happening right now.
Kathy? I know there's a lot of movement on this bill, but does that imply, obviously, an RVT without a vet acting as an agent is diagnosing?
It says
as well as providing medication. So
I forgot, there's, you know, on that, the bill removes the requirement for the veterinarian to remove the documentation of the animal's condition that the board previously approved in January, which is a big one because under federal law, a VCPR has to be established by a veterinarian who's examined the animal in some way. And if this bill provides for indirect supervision and there's no veterinarian review of the animal's condition, where's the examination? So then, we get back to potentially not complying with federal law when administering these types of medications. And diagnosis, who is reviewing the information? A veterinarian is required to be the diagnosing individual to prescribe the medication to the animal. So if they're not reviewing any documentation under this bill, what's happening? Who's determining that the administration of the medication is appropriate?
I think it would be best to take public comment before we make a motion, since
Grant Miller, CVMA. If this computer were a piece of paper with my script, I would be throwing it over my shoulder right now. I'm not going to be able to be on sticking to a script on this bill because of the very quick left-hand turn that it precipitously took just a couple of days ago. The CVMA has a support letter prepared for this bill. But the support letter was based on the version of the bill that preceded this version of the bill. And I can tell you that we have a number of great advantages here. This is an excellent author, and the author is very receptive to working with stakeholders on this bill. And those stakeholders include CARVTA, I'm sure you'll hear from Nancy in a moment, the CVMA, the shelters, pharma. A number of people have weighed in. And I can tell you that I have received word specifically from the author's office that the inclusion of viruses and bacteria was an oversight, and that they will absolutely remove that. Unfortunately, the bill in print is the bill in print, and that's what you have to look at today. But I will tell you that officially the author has said we will take that out. This is not meant to be sick animals. This is meant to be well animal care as originally intended. But again, this is what is in front of us. I can also tell you that a number of the folks working on this bill have anticipated the concerns that Ms. Welsh illuminated just moments ago, and that we are working on bill language to address all of those issues. It's just unfortunate timing that your board is presented with this version of the bill versus what may be, because the hearing for this bill is on Monday. I hope to be there for the CVMA to testify in support of the bill. And it's highly likely we will, because of our conversations with the author's office, in which they've indicated that they're receptive to making extensive changes to the bill. I can't say much more because we don't really know where they're going to end up coming, but I will say that I have a great deal of faith in this author's office to move in a direction that we feel is appropriate for the intended concept that originally came from this board in relation to access to care, and that they're very open and willing to work with stakeholders. And I can answer questions if you have any.
Dr. Miller, what is the definition of an agent then? How does that work?
So I'll step away from this bill and just give a brief history in relation to the brainchild, if you will, of how this was originally intended. The concept is that if you're in a registered veterinary premises under direct veterinarian supervision, meaning that the veterinarian is present, that they can forego their own in-person exam of the animal, but create a protocol in which RVTs would collect data on their behalf for the sole purposes of either administering vaccinations or providing preventative procedures to for parasite control. In essence, we were looking at well animal care. The concept is that if a veterinarian created a protocol that said, you know, we need to gather this historical data, we need to gather this physical exam data, and if all of these are green check marks, then we can proceed with having an RVT administer the vaccines and the parasite control. And so the concept is that for the specific purpose of those things, direct supervision could be construed to mean something done pursuant to this written protocol, but only for those narrow, well animal care tasks, and only pursuant to a written protocol that's agreed upon. And then subsequent to the extensive disclosures that we discussed relating to the RVT identifying themselves to the public being sure that they understand that that's what's happening, and then the agreement only lasting provided that both the veterinarian and the RVT were still working together. If it's not, then they have to terminate that.
Could an agent represent both the veterinarian and the owner?
So, as it stands now, we don't actually have a definition of client. So, I mean, when we talk about the VCPR, it's not the veterinarian owner-patient relationship, it's the veterinarian client-patient relationship. And as of now, there's no official definition in the law as to what constitutes a client. However, if you look at Section 2032.1 of our VCPR, it's implied that the client is the person who presents the animal to you for care and with whom you communicate about a course of action for this given condition that you've diagnosed and want to treat. So can a client have an agent? Certainly. If the, let's say, Brad Pitt's dog walker comes in and says, look, I'm just the dog walker, I'm bringing this dog here on behalf of Mr. Pitt, that could be an agent for the client. There's nothing expressly written in the law that defines what that is, but it's an organic, natural thing that occurs every day. There's never been anything in the law that would allow an agent for a veterinarian in establishing the VCPR. This would be the first of its kind in our nation that I'm aware of.
I'm just thinking of a large horse practice where veterinarians often rely on what the groom or the assistant trainer said, all the temperatures are normal this morning, we're going to go ahead and hold on to it. I mean, that person's representing the client, essentially. Is that correct?
In that circumstance, yes.
Jessica?
I just wanted to clarify, for purposes of this bill, when we talk about agent, it's the RVT acting as the agent of the veterinarian, not the client.
Right. That's, yeah. Yes.
And as I understood Dr. Grant's question, it was could one person act as the agent of the veterinarian and of the client? And I don't believe that they could, because under the Veterinary Medicine Practice Act, there are provisions that exempt from the Practice Act performing veterinary services on an animal owned by a person, but those services are provided without fee. And that structure presumes two individuals. So you've got the owner and then a person performing services for free for the owner. So in this scenario, there would be a substitute for the person providing services, but there's no provision for a substitute for the owner. And who is the owner? We get back to documentation problems there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Kathy?
Thank you, Dr. Miller. I want to clarify a couple things. I know you said the hearing is Monday and you're working with the author, et cetera, et cetera. Your feeling is, your plan is to support, if re-amended or if amended, to remove some of the issues that just came up with these most recent package of amendments. Is that correct?
Yes, we would very much like to submit our support letter on this bill, because we're very confident that the author will take the corrections that we pointed out, which are very similar to Ms. Welsh's analysis. And we while the bill is in the form that it's in now, and it will unlikely be able to be amended prior to the committee meeting, we would still like to testify in support to just signal that we're working with the author and that we think that we've worked through a number of these issues in the bill.
Okay, I just want to, because it's funny because I, went through the packet and went support on this one, right, as it was written until the amendments, and it's like, oh my goodness. The other question, the definition, we've talked about client owner definitions, and we've had a discussion, we were trying to find legislation to change, and we had a much better defined. Is that one of the other things you're trying to get implemented in this? Is that definition that we all kind of agreed to?
So thank you for that question. So we are not the bill sponsor, so I can't speak with any authority, but as a supporter of the bill, I would tell you that it would be our preference to just remove all those definitions. The definitions that were in the bill were there originally as part of our original complete package that was A to Z, meant to be a legislative package that would address a number of issues. And because the bill was amended to remove some of that package, it resulted in it being fragmented in a way that really doesn't make a lot of sense to some of the other stakeholders. And so while I can't speak for the author and I can't speak for the sponsor of the bill, as the CVMA, as a supporter, we would see that just removing the definitions altogether would be better at this point, because they're somewhat tangential to what this bill is trying to do. They were intended to be there for another purpose, but the bill's been altered since then.
Okay, so that would apply to the direct supervision change that
Correct.
Tara was speaking to as
Correct.
well. Okay, thank you.
Correct. Yeah. So, the board's in a difficult spot. What I would love to be able to see is a representative of the board in the room on Monday, either way, to just signal that the board would like to work with the author on the bill, whether it's oppose unless amended or support if amended. I think that would be ideal if we could have the board's involvement.
And it's at 9 o'clock?
I'll let you know.
Okay.
It's Monday.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I was just moving some of my Tuesday morning stuff to Monday, so.
Okay, I'll let you know.
Okay, thanks. Let's hear from the folks online, please, moderator.
This is the moderator, the Q&A.
We can't hear you.
Trying again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I switched the microphone. This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate and log on via WebEx, you can click on the question mark inside of the square, type comment, send it to all panelists. Or if you're calling in, you can raise your hand by pressing *3 to raise your virtual hand. I do have an individual identified as Nancy Elrich. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. I'm going to send a request to unmute your microphone, and I'm going to give you a 15-second warning before the 3 minutes are up.
Hi, I would like to make a comment about the concerns of legal counsel, eliminating this, the client having to fill out a form saying that they know that this is an RVT and that they're accepting the services is really totally ridiculous for a couple of reasons. Number one, when they're making the appointment, the client is the one who's going to choose whether or not they want to see an RVT or a veterinarian. So they're going to know that they have an appointment with an RVT. And then when they come into the exam room, the RVT is going to be wearing a name tag, an 18-point type with their name, their fact that they're an RVT, and their license number on it. So there is no confusion. And just to let you know, I did this very thing, I believe, about 30 years ago when there was a different definition of VCPR, when we assumed that it was okay as long as the veterinarian had examined the animal within the previous year. And the clients were extremely happy with the service for several reasons. Number one, of course, it cost less. Number two, they waited a lot less time to see me than they did for the veterinarian. And number three, they almost all said that I did a better job than the veterinarian, that I spent more time, answered more questions, because for me, this was a high-end task. For veterinarian, vaccinations is the lowest end task they have, and they're bored with these appointments. So I can't encourage you enough to support this bill with reasonable amendments, but asking a client to fill out a form saying they know they're dealing with an RVT, it's really quite offensive to the RVT community. Have you ever walked into a doctor's office and had to fill out a form saying that it's okay for an RN to treat you? I mean, really, think about that.
This is the moderator. No further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes. Ms. Laredo.
Okay, well, I did not wear a hat today, but I have 3 separate hats that I'm looking at this from. As a consumer, I think this is great. It will increase access, I believe. As an RVT, I'm thrilled. It will essentially increase scope of practice, which is not under the purview of the board. If I put on my consumer protection hat, that's where my concerns come in. So I was asked about this last week, and I didn't realize there had been amendments, so I'm a little confused. I appreciate all of the comments today. One, as an RVT, I very much appreciate the, I would say, freedom from liability. So I'm working under the direction of a veterinarian, either direct or indirect. So that's one question, is now you're under indirect supervision. If something goes wrong, is that my license in addition to the veterinarian's? To Nancy's point, having to fill something else out, I mean, I can definitely see the point of that, but I might have a different perspective because this is the way I was practicing in shelter medicine. I was always kind of working independently doing these things. My other, I'm going to say something that's going to make me very unpopular. My other concern is in regards to consumer protection is not all RVTs have the same level of education and experience. So you can have an RVT going in to perform these things that has a bachelor's degree and 10 years of experience, and you can have an RVT who found a loophole to be licensed without any type of education going in and performing the same thing. So they will be wearing a name tag that says they're an RVT and their license number, but that doesn't ensure any type of skill level. So it does, I think, fall back on the veterinarian trusting the RVTs to perform these tasks. I do support this bill despite my concerns, but I do appreciate all of the public comment.
So you support this bill as written?
I want to say support if amended, but I can't give you the amendments because that's too much brain power at this point.
Dr. Nolan?
I also support this bill, and I was very in favor of it a few days ago. But I think where I run into trouble is if you wanted to follow through, it's on subsection B of 4826.6. Gosh, I've lost my own. B of 7, it looks like. No, B of, yeah. Anyway, it says a veterinarian may allow a registered veterinary technician to act as an agent for the veterinarian and for the purpose of, and then we struck permitting a registered veterinary technician to administer to an animal patient preventative or prophylactic vaccines. Instead, they've inserted establishing a veterinary client-patient relationship, and I'm struggling a lot with that. I like the previous wording a lot better. And then I also am struggling with the idea of adding viruses and bacteria to that, because that's really well outside of the scope of what I thought this was going to accomplish from a wellness standpoint. And again, I think Dr. Miller mentioned earlier the overuse of antibiotics, and that's what we use for bacteria. So that really opens up the scope of this. So those are my two, big concerns. And I do also agree with the idea of adding the definitions. Those definitions are really not, what we have considered the correct definitions at this point. We've tried to rewrite them, and we're trying to work on them. For instance, defining the client as the owner of the animal. And if you wanted to use Dr. Grant's example, we have racehorses that have 150, 500 owners. They have syndicates. It's very, so I think that really steps us back in the wrong direction. So I would like to support, if amended, with those three concerns.
Kathy?
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Nolan. And actually, that's kind of what I was thinking too. I'm wondering if we could say support if amended to return the language to its original form in that section that you just mentioned, and to remove the new definitions that we're finding problematic, or all the new definitions if that's what the CVMA is thinking.
So have we just done a motion, or is that not legal? Okay.
Is that your motion?
That is my motion. But I also had a question because Ms. Welsh brought up a form to be signed. I didn't see that in there. Was that just a discussion of what could happen? I don't see any verbiage that talks about having the client sign something that an RVT is doing the treatment.
So in the board's regulatory proposal it approved in January, these provisions included a form signed by the veterinarian and the RVT that they were agreeing that the veterinarian was still assuming the risk of all acts by the RVT to the examination, and the veterinarian was authorizing the RVT to act as the veterinarian's agent. That would be in the file.
But that's been struck by this original bill.
That's gone now. And then also, before the exam, the bill and the board in its regulatory proposal would have required the RVT acting as the agent. Part of this is cut off, I think, to disclose.
Do you want me to read it?
Yeah.
So it's 5B. This is currently struck, but was in the VMB's original package. After the disclosure described in subparagraph A is, well, let me start that. The registered veterinary technician shall obtain the oral or written authorization of the client before proceeding with the registered veterinary technician's examination of the animal patient and administration of specified vaccines or medications. The client authorization shall be recorded by the registered veterinary technician in the animal patient's medical record. So there's the possibility of either oral authorization, which the RVT writes in the record, or that the client just signs something acknowledging that this is an RVT appointment and that goes in the record.
And this is about acknowledging that the RVT is acting as the veterinarian's agent. You know, it's not just about, oh, I prefer an RVT to, give my animal a vaccination. It's about this contractual requirement in law, under federal law and California law. It's about, properly establishing this agency for consumer protection purposes, because if something goes wrong, how does the consumer trace this back? How does the board properly enforce that these procedures are being met? That was, the intent behind the disclosure of the RVT to the consumer and receiving oral or written consent by the client for the RVT to act as the agent of the veterinarian, because the client in these scenarios is no longer going to be having a direct conversation with the veterinarian unless, they have questions. But this, proposes that the RVT is examining the animal, documenting, the veterinarian's reviewing just the documentation and authorizing administration.
Jessica.
So to Kathy's recommendation, because I know you made the motion to support if amended and identified 3 issues, and then Kathy recommended reverting back to the prior version, which was the March 21st, 2023 version, and remove definitions. Would that address the concerns that you raised?
It's insufficient to address them.
That's what we're concerned.
So I guess I have a concern with this motion, and it goes by, and I think I guess it depends on the author, but we just went through this whole discussion of how important it is to oppose something so that they listen to you and you can amend things, and they're willing to amend things. And then we're saying, oh, no, let's support it if amended, and that I think we were just talking about how useless that statement is, although then I get the impression that with this author, it actually would be meaningful, and maybe it is more nuanced than,
I think the rule still stands the same
Okay.
way. I'm very sad that you can't see another version of the bill that I think would address the majority of your concerns. I can tell you two things. One, the hearing's at 10:30. Two, that section that you're concerned about relating to the disclosures has also drawn the concern of other stakeholders, and the author's office is aware of that and is very sensitive to the fact that others out there also have a worry about striking that. We would, as mentioned, the CVMA would very much, we are anticipating supporting this bill. We'd very much like to get our support letter in on the bill, and we're waiting to hear from the author's office on whether or not they can get a little bit further with the wording, which I really believe they are going to do that. But I think it's very difficult for this board at this point to get there too, because you're looking at what you're looking at, and that's just it's just timing. But I think that if somebody is representing the board at that meeting, at the hearing on Monday, and is willing to come to the table to discuss the changes, I think that's the most important part. And whether the position is positive or negative, I think it's most important that the board is just present and is able to convey some of the expertise, because this is a concept that was really hatched largely in a collaborative effort between the CVMA and the board, and I think that expertise needs to be present in the future conversations on the bill.
Okay.
Thanks.
Dr. Grant.
Dr. Miller, from a historical standpoint, if you could tolerate my lack of history here, what is driving this? Is the clients expected to, or the expectation that the visit could be more efficient and they wouldn't be charged for as much for an office visit as if the veterinarian saw them? Or?
Thank you. That's a really great question. This is solely being driven by access to veterinary care. So, Dr. Grant, the Access to Veterinary Care Coalition, which is based in the University of Tennessee, did a very extensive survey that showed that 1 out of every 4 pet-owning households can't afford even basic veterinary care, which really is confined to vaccinations, parasite control, emergency animal care, and sick animal care. So 1 out of every 4 can't afford that. That issue is largely rooted in social service challenges. It is really something that people like Dr. Solicito, they have a lot of experience in trying to manage this segment of the community. But what we've found as the veterinary community is that there are some things that we think that we could do to streamline the ability for people to access veterinary care. So if the problem is largely financial, then the number of veterinarians is actually less important. You can put a veterinarian on every corner, but if 1 out of every 4 can't afford to walk in, then what's the use of that? So we did research to show that RVTs in their CVTEA approved curricula, which is a standardized licensing curriculum, they all have knowledge in the administration and handling of vaccinations, the diseases that those vaccinations are intended to treat, the identification of parasites, the ability to handle and administer anti-parasite medication. This is inherently, it's taught to all of them. So it's within their licensure and their continuing education to be able to do that. We also did surveys of practices in California to show that when they offered what are called tech appointments to allow RVTs to give vaccinations to animals, the cost of those appointments was far lower than the cost of one with a veterinarian. So I believe the average veterinarian appointment was around $107 for a canine distemper and rabies vaccine. The same appointment, if offered through a technician, averaged around $57. So that shows that veterinarians will pass along the cost savings to their clients if they can find cost savings in providing the care. that's what hatched the idea of expanding what RVTs would do in practice, which is well within the scope of their licensure and their education, to expand what they're doing so that they're running in exam room 3 to do well animal care, which frees up veterinarians to work in exam room 2 on sick animal care. That was the general concept of it. And then this is kind of, we started it in regulations, which were very complex and tremendous number of hours on behalf of Ms. Welsh and Karen Halbo, who's our past DCA counsel. And the idea was well received by this board and by the CVMA and by CARVTA. And so where that went is it caught the attention of the senator, who said, well, geez, this looks like a really great idea. Let's pick this up and try to run it in statute, which basically fast forwards the process. A regulatory package can take 3 to 6 years to pass. Legislation is every year. It starts in February, it ends in October. And so we can have a much faster progression. The challenge, of course, are situations like this where you can have a bill that has a lot of technical language in it that can suddenly take a left-hand turn. And anyway, I'll stop. Sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Do we want to keep that motion, or are we, if so, we'll finish public comment and take a vote, or do you have any?
Can you repeat? The motion was a little fuzzy.
So, and we never got a second. So, Dr. Noland, you had made a motion to support if amended, and you raised 3 issues that you would like to see addressed. And then Kathy said that she was thinking of the same thing and then recommended to revert back to the prior version and remove the definitions, but she didn't officially second the motion.
Okay. I'm also unclear on what it means to revert to the prior version, because Dr. Nolan wanted to return to the prior language just for subdivision B only on establishing the VCPR, and I wasn't sure if Ms. Bowler was reflecting that statement or if you meant to return to the prior version of the entire bill.
Yeah, I admit they're tired of the bill before all these other things got added, like bacterial and viral, but I'm in all of that because I think the bill as we see it, we have to oppose.
And she never actually seconded the motion, so it's not official on the floor now.
Right, so, yeah, feel free to make a new motion, Ms. Mueller.
Wait, do you rescind the motion then?
Well, it wasn't seconded, so does it matter?
So it dies?
Yeah, it dies.
Unless you rescind it, yeah.
Okay, do we have another motion? Is there a hand up? We're going to finish the motion and then we'll take the public comment.
Oh, sure. Can I suggest that in any letter, especially if it was oppose or oppose unless amended, the board could explain that it was prepared to support the March 23 version of the bill. However, recent amendments have unfortunately resulted in the board changing its position, and it's significant. When the board is not included in discussion on significant amendments like this, I don't know what else the board is supposed to do, because the board, already looked at and approved the prior version that the board itself crafted, and then it almost appears like somebody hijacked the bill, came in, blew it up, and now, what is the board supposed to do with that? There's some really disconcerting provisions in this bill now. Yeah. So anyway, if you did an opposed letter, you could explain that the board wanted to support it, but at this point, it has these concerns.
Okay. Jennifer.
I just want to comment, I don't want to oppose this, I want to support this, but I have the tab open that it was amended 2 days ago.
Yeah, it was during the MDC meeting at night, I think.
2 days ago, so I don't want to oppose this, but I can't support it the way it is. So I like the support if amended, because at least there is support there, but I just wanted to say that.
And so what about the concept of they aren't going to do anything different with a bill if it has support in it? I mean, does that not bother you?
Not enough to oppose it.
Okay.
So is that an official motion?
Sure. Support if, I move that we support if amended.
And I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. Public comment?
Okay, so to be clear, support if amended, just period, or to resolve concerns raised at the board's meeting, or specific amendments?
Yeah, support if amended to resolve the board's concerns.
Are you okay with that addition, Ms. Prado?
Yes, and then do we need to include language like we did, that we direct the executive director to talk, that language, or the executive leadership? Remember how we did that in the
Delegate to executive committee and the EO. So Ms. Loretta, would you want to amend the motion to support if amended to resolve the board's concerns and delegate authority to the executive committee and the executive officer to work with stakeholders to work on the concerns?
Yes.
And Ms. Prado, do you agree with that amendment?
Yes, I agree with that amendment and second the motion.
Okay, public comment? None in the room?
Can we have board comment on
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Since the motion was for support unless amended, would it be possible for other board members to include items they would like to put into the if amended portion of the letter? I mean, I guess I have some concerns I would really like to put in writing. Is that possible?
To clarify, the support if amended?
Yeah, can we define if amended a little more clearly, or no?
Okay, so what you could do, and Ms. Laredo and Ms. Prado would have to sign on for this. It could be support if amended to resolve the board's concerns, including, and then have your 30,000 foot or very specific, absolute must get resolved items. So, but, keep those short, and we need a very direct description.
And I'm only saying that to try to help with the conversation. It feels like it's very wishy-washy.
Yeah.
So we would have to hash that out right now.
Well, I would go back to the three things that I brought up. One is the insertion of the ability of a RVT to establish a veterinary client-patient relationship. The second was the definitions and terminology that were amended and, in my opinion, a problem.
So you're asking for those to be removed? Is that the specific?
Yes, I think that would, or rewritten to be more analogous with the old insertion that we had. And the third is the insertion of the viruses and bacteria. I have a real problem with that. Those are the three things that I for sure would like to be discussed.
I just am going to say I'm not going to be supportive of this because I think we need to oppose it, so we can still go forward and take a vote, and obviously the rest of the board may have different feelings, but I just want to voice that concern about the stance that we're taking. I think that there's probably more than what we're saying in these amendments, and we need to pick it apart even further almost. But Kathy, you had something to say?
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand, Jennifer. I understand where we're coming from because this bill flipped 2 days ago. But I feel like as a board, we just got it. There's a lot into it that I have not, and we're being asked to identify amendments that we'd be okay with supporting the bill if they changed it. And, we want to support it in theory, but what we have is words on paper right now. And that's what's there. And I honestly feel like it's my duty to oppose this bill as written, but I love the idea of in the letter saying we are in support of the concept, we were in support of the March 24th. It's the certain amendments, it's just that I'm right now not prepared to go through it and decide which ones I'd be in favor of removing. I thought it was an easy flip to just flip back to that original, but that didn't do the trick, right? So I don't know. This is a tough one because, as Dr. Miller said, we want to support it, but not as it's written today.
Yeah, and I think our letter will be pretty clear on that. I think that would, well, depends on, we might be supporting it. I mean, it depends what the board votes. So, but if we end up going in the other direction, we can have a very clear letter that we truly, obviously, are in support of the whole concept of this. But we'll see what, I mean, it may vote to be support if amended. Yes.
I think we're back to sort of the terminology between opposed if amended, support if amended. And I still, having been on the board for 8 years, I don't understand fully the nuances with all of this. So I think it's really difficult. It seems like it depends on the sponsor and the actual author. And so I don't have that sort of inside knowledge. It's difficult for me.
And also, just in committee analysis, typically the Assembly and Senate BMPs, when they do their analysis, they'll put historically, they'll support if amended, oppose unless amended, but appropriations won't do the unless or if, they'll do support or oppose. But recently, too, there has been a shift to where Senate and Assembly BMPs do something similar to where it's like support or oppose. And so those are just things to keep in mind, is that in a committee analysis, when you do the caveats, it will take your first position primarily.
And Tara, you were right about this going longer than we thought. Go ahead, Tara.
Build on Jessica's statement. If you do support if amended, you will not be registered in that analysis. You really won't, because at this point you don't support it. So, the analyses always list support and opposition. But if you oppose unless amended, you will absolutely be represented in the analysis, and every other committee and legislator who views the analysis later sees, there's some unresolved problems here, what's going on? Otherwise, nobody's reading your support if amended letter, and everybody just thinks it's fine because you're not well represented in the analysis.
That's very, very helpful, and I think that is a bit of a shift over the last 8 years, so I really appreciate that insight.
Okay, so we still have a motion. I don't see any more hands, and there's no public comment in the room. Moderator, Tara?
Okay, so there was discussion about potentially amending the motion to include 3 items that Dr. Nolan identified, but there was, I don't believe I heard Ms. Laredo and Ms. Prado agreeing to those revisions.
I'd like to actually redact my amendments at this point because I'm going to vote no.
Okay, so right now the motion is support if amended to resolve the board's concerns and delegate authority to the executive committee and executive officer to work with stakeholders to resolve the board's concerns.
Yes.
Yes, and to pick apart my own motion to resolve the board's concerns, but we don't have concerns listed. Yes.
Okay. Moderator, can you open it up to public comment online, please?
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions will be on the screen shortly. If you would like to participate, click the question mark inside of the square, type comment, send to all panelists. You can raise your hand if you're calling in by pressing *3 from your phone to raise your virtual hand. Do you have individual identified as Nancy Berkeley? I'm going to send a request to mute your microphone. I'm going to provide you an alert 50 seconds before your 3 minutes are up. Request has been sent.
The name's Ehrlich, so next time you can say it right.
Ehrlich, thank you.
Okay. I just had a comment back on what Jennifer said earlier about her concerns about the RVT's level of skills. And I would like to remind her and everyone else that all eligibility categories have been determined to be equivalent. So no matter what category someone used to be eligible to take the exam, they were considered to be equivalent. And that doing this job, vaccinating animals for the veterinarian, is no different than any other job task that a veterinarian assigns to an RVT. Section 2035A says the supervising veterinarian shall be responsible for determining the competency of the RVT permit holder or veterinary assistant to perform allowable animal health care tasks. So it is the supervising veterinarian's responsibility to make sure that whatever RVT they assign to do this job is competent to do that, unlike the same as every other task that they assign to an RVT. So I don't think that there's any reason to be concerned about the level of skills of the RVT. As a matter of fact, as I said earlier, 30 years ago, I used to do this. I tried to get other RVTs in the practice to do it, and they wouldn't do it because they were not comfortable dealing with clients directly like this. So it's not just the veterinarian, but the RVTs themselves are going to be singling themselves out to decide who's qualified to do this.
This is the moderator. No further requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you. Can we call for a vote?
Dr. Solocito?
No.
Ms. Bowler? Dr. Grant?
No.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Nolan?
No.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Ms. Berber?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
No.
The motion is 3 yes and 5 no. The motion dies.
Okay, do we have another motion? Motion? Yes.
Weird, but could I make a motion to oppose unless amended? Which
Yes.
I realize is the nuanced thing, but the point is, that's what I feel. And the amendments, if we want to go back to it, do the executive committee and send in the additional information, Tara can wordsmith it, but that would be my motion.
I second the motion.
Tara?
All right, so let's be clear. Motion to oppose unless amended. Are we doing to resolve the board's concerns, including the insertion of subdivision B regarding VCPR, the insertion of new definitions,
Bacteria, viruses.
right, the insertion of treatment for viruses and bacteria. Those are the three big ones, I believe.
The disclosures.
I have raised that, but I have not heard the board include that in a list. So that could be part of the conversation, but if we're just gonna, have that quick list, it seemed like you kept going with the top three.
Okay. And we'll say including but not limited to?
Well, I think we can just do including, concerns
Okay.
including the top three that I just read. Yeah, so subdivision B, establishing the VCPR, definitions and treating viruses and bacteria, and then delegate to the executive committee and executive officer authority to engage in conversations with the author's office and stakeholders to resolve the board's concerns.
So that is Kathy's motion, and Dr. Solocito, do you still second that motion?
Yes. Okay, any more discussion from the board? Don't see any in the room. Public comment? None. Online public comment, please.
This is the moderator. I'm opening up the Q&A now. Instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate, click that question mark inside of the square, type comments, send it to all panelists, or raise your hand from your phone by pressing on *3.
Yeah.
No requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, thank you. Can we take a vote?
Dr. Solocito?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Yes.
Dr. Grant?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
No.
Dr. Nolan?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
No. No.
Ms. Berber?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, we are going to break for lunch. I think we should do a short lunch because we have people who are, have some flights and things, so return at 1 o'clock? Great.